Hi and welcome to my channel, I'm Simon, and today I'm back with a video that I don't think I've done. Well, I've not done a TBR and recommendations video for ages, and this video was slightly inspired by the fact that some old historical recommendation videos seem to have been suddenly found by quite a few people, and they're asking why I hadn't done another one since. And the answer is because I haven't read that much historical fiction. However, I have got a real urge for it at the moment, and kind of really for quite a specific kind of historical fiction, which I have some recommendations for. I have quite a TBR for. Well, no, not even actually quite a TBR for. I think it's like 5 or 6 books, because I'm hoping to do a little mini project which will get bigger, because what I'm going to be asking for is for lots of recommendations from you lovely lot, if you have them. And yeah, now one thing I should say is you're getting 3 videos a week for the next 2 weeks, you lucky ducks. I didn't do one on Sunday because I was in I just had a bit of a vlog meltdown in terms of trying to start quite a few that just weren't going anywhere, and also still having not got around to finishing editing my Italy vlog, which is almost done, so should be on the channel here on Sunday. But on Thursday I'll be doing my February book haul, so all the books that I bought, some of the books that I was sent in February. And then next week, Mum and I will have our Women's Prize long list reaction video on Tuesday. She may be coming to film it over the weekend. And then on Thursday, it'll be my February wrap up, and then a vlog of some sort the Sunday after that, and then we'll go back to Wednesdays and Sundays. So a bit of just a bumper crop of videos for now, but I am away for part of March and would love to know in the comments down below any videos that you would like to see. Now, and like literally ask away, I can't guarantee I'll make them, but I'd love to hear what you'd like to see, and if I can't make it for then, I could make it for another point, because it's always good to have a few in the back. Now, back to what I actually want to talk about, and that was historical fiction and this sort of specific kind of TBR that I'm trying to build for myself, because it's something that I've realised I really want to head to. And there's a few books that have made me feel like this, and they might give you a clue as to why I'm to what this TBR, historical TBR will be. The first of those is The New Life, which I read back in January. In fact, I read both of the books that initially inspired it back in January, by Tom Crewe. This is all about 2 men who are writing a book about what it's like to be, or looking around sexuality, and particularly homosexuality in the Victorian era, which I absolutely loved. And we will come back to this book at the end, because there's a specific link, or this made me want to head to a specific book, sorry. So we've got this one. And then the other one that kind of made me start thinking about this was The Dreaming by Bagu, which is a short story collection about what it's like to be queer in the Caribbean. And there were certain ones in here that really hit home, that were about stories from sort of generations gone before, or narrators from generations gone before. And that has kind of stayed with me as like, oh, I'd like to. Also, both of these books have quite a lot of yearning in them, as does the book that I'm currently reading. And loving to hate is the only way, or hating to love, what's the term? I love it, and I also kind of hate it. It's Bret, Easton, Ellis's The Shards, which could be classified as historical fiction, because technically I think, isn't history like, well, history could be yesterday technically, but it's also something about 30 years, and this is set in the, is it the 80s or the 90s? I keep forgetting, because sometimes in the 80s, sorry, it's set in around 81. And this book is about a character called Bret, who's going to school in the 80s when there is this serial killer on the loose, and Bret Easton Ellis is kind of playing with metafiction in a lot of ways, because the main character is called Bret, who's writing a book called Less Than Zero as this all goes on. And that's one of the bits that I'm absolutely loving about it. But I think I may even do a whole video on this book, because both in terms of the style and in terms of the plot and everything, there is stuff that I love and I'm finding addictive, and then there's stuff that I'm finding really annoying or just horrible to read. It's really, I've not had an reading experience like this in quite some time. Anyway, they all link into one particular type of historical, I guess, niche that I want to get to, which is queer historical stories, and today is the last day of LGBTQIA plus History Month, and I had realised, apart from this big beast, I had not really headed to any other queer books this month. I've read a couple of historical books, but not any queer historical. I'm just looking to double check. No, I haven't. And it's something that I definitely want to head to more. Now, the reason that this is a little bit niche is because there are a few books that would be deemed historical that have come out recently, like Leda, which I'm really, really excited to read, by Hyatt, because this has been recently discovered. It was an unknown and unpublished novel until Peninsula Press picked it up, and I think Mark wrote this in the 60s? Yeah, and it gives an insight into queer working class life in the 1960s. The reason that I'm saying this is a little bit different is because that was written at the time, and I'm kind of wanting to head to more historical fiction, as in it's written now about historical periods where I also learn a lot that's kind of hindsight based. There's a lot in, for example, The New Life that is really, really hindsight based, whereas this is obviously a depiction of what it was like at the time, which I also kind of want. So yeah, I have a few books that I would recommend if you're looking for something similar. Now, one of them, again, this falls into the category of Mark's book that I was just talking about, and that is Tales of the City by Armistead Maupin. And I think this is quite a historical artefact in itself, because this was the 1970s? 1980s edition. And I love these covers. In fact, it might be 1990s, but as I said, if it's over 30 years, apparently it is historical. Now, this would definitely kind of read kind of historical because of when it was set, but at the time, it was what was going on. But again, there's not that layer of hindsight. There might be with Armistead's next book, which I think is about Mona from this series, and looking back on the 80s. And I think that's going to be really, really incredible. I'm very, very excited for that whenever it may turn up. But that said, this is sort of book that I would really recommend as a historical read now because of the way it depicts the time in which it was set. The other ones that I have that kind of would be good if you're kind of wanting to dip your toes into queer historical novels are, you go to Sarah Waters, who tends to write sapphic historical novels as a general rule, or they'll have a sapphic twist in them or characters in them, or I mean queer, actually, let's just go with queer. And yeah, I really, really love her books. I've nearly read all of them, but not quite. I struggled with A Little Stranger a little bit, and I also didn't love The Paying Guests as much as the others that I've read. The others that I read are The Night Watch, which I keep holding up, and oh my goodness, her debut, which I really liked, and another one, but the ones that I haven't read, is probably better to do it that way around, are Fingersmith and Tipping the Velvet, which are probably two of her most famous. And Fingersmith I'm annoyed about because I've wanted to read it for several Christmases, and the last time I went to go and read it, someone sort of hinted at what the twist was. Why do people do that? So anyway, but if you're wanting to dip in your toe, Sarah Waters is your go-to. And actually, I think Mercedes has recently done a video, which I need to watch. I haven't, it's in my watch list, of books that if you loved Sarah Waters, you should head to. And I will head to that video because that might add some books that I can throw into the mix of this. Another go-to author of mine is Patrick Gale. And this is probably my favourite of his books. And this is going to sound like a backhanded compliment, but I mean it in the best possible way. The reason that I love this one the most is it feels the least Patrick Gale-ish, in the fact that he writes about, this one's kind of the most rough around the edges, I would say. Because when Patrick Gale writes about even like dastardly characters, there is a, I don't know, not like, how can I put it? I guess what I mean by this is it's just rougher. It's a bit of a bolshier book, if that makes sense. Almost a Mardy book, if you're from my like original part of, well, where I was originally born in the UK, you'll know what Mardy means. But yeah, it's also a book that is about sexuality and queerness before homosexuality had a label of any kind. And I really, really loved that about this, as well as, like I said, it was quite rough around the edges, very like one of the characters in it who is odious, but I kind of fancy even though he does odious things. So we have that there. And speaking of people I fancy, that's why Tom Selleck is out for this video. And then my last of my recommendations before I head to my, this is a bit of a random ramshackle video. No wonder I haven't done one of these for a while. But my last recommendation is one of my favourite books that I have read I should have actually included Sarah Winman's Tin Man in this video. That could have been included. But anyway, this is one of my favourite books that I've read like in years. And I think this again is a book that reminded me that I can quite often stay in a certain niche within the queer reads that I read, and I want to sort of break out of that. And the book is The Prophets by Robert Jones Jr. and this is set on a slave plantation where there are two men who fall in love with each other before, again, like I mentioned with the Patrick Gale, homosexuality was a label, or being queer was a label, and it's how the different people react to that relationship. Some who understand it, some who don't care, and some who are completely against it. And it's that sort of, I think what I feel like is I've read quite a lot of queer books, either written at the time or written now, that look back on the 80s or look back at what it's like to be queer and white historically. And I want to move away from that and to the experiences that I've heard about the most and head to some different ones. Or if they are about the queer white experience, I want it to be pre-1980s and kind of further back. I think that should make sense. One that I am desperately seeking before I head to the ones that I've got on my TBR, as it were, is The New Life basically had this segment where, segment, that sounds awful, that makes it sound like it was really formulaic, and it wasn't. What I loved about this book was when it went off on these kind of, not tangents, what do I mean? Let's move on, because I've got confused in my own head. I'm overthinking this video now because I'm thinking this is not one of my finest videos and maybe I should just stop and not record any further, but I've got to break out of doing that because that's what was happening all last week with my vlogs. I was having vlogger's doubt. Anyway, I was going to say vlogger's droop then, let's not talk about that. There was a part of this book that I absolutely loved where two of the main characters go to meet another secretly queer couple who live out in the, well, it's actually in the Peak District, in the rural Peak District where I'm from, where we say Mardy and up we duck. And I loved that because fiction-wise, it's not anything I've read before. I've read Mike Parker's On the Red Hill and absolutely loved that. That's based, well, it's a non-fiction novel, so it's based on fact, which again, I want that, I just want it fictionalised. I don't know why that is. I find historical non-fiction jars with me more than historical fiction based on fact. Don't know why that is, it's just who I am, there we are. Anyway, I would love if you've read any books that are based on what it was like in the past, in history, for queer couples living in rural surroundings rather than cities. That is something that I'd be really, really keen to read because it's just not something that I have discovered or seen very much. And when I asked previously, I didn't get many, I think I got one response because maybe it's just something that isn't about. Anyway, moving on to the 5 books that I have got as kind of a TBR for myself. But like I said, if you've got any books that you would recommend of this kind of very niche, savage oeuvre, I've not said that word for so long and now I've said it in quite a few videos recently. I would love those in the comments down below. But the 5 that I've got that, like I said, are sort of a mini TBR that I'm not making an official one, and this isn't an official project that I want to do because that will probably know me, kill it. But I have, firstly, I was well aware when I was looking through my shelves, I don't think I've got any historical trans fiction on my shelves at all. I've got some non-fiction, but nothing like, well, there was one book and it was called Confessions of a Fox that I did read, but sadly I really didn't like it. I thought it was mildly pretentious and had, which is going to be odd that I say this because there's a book coming up that has these. It had lots of, what is it when you've got the things in there? Oh my goodness, it's in here. What do you call them? Why can't I think? where is it? All of these bits. I'll remember the word in a bit and then I'll be completely and utterly annoyed with myself. But it had lots of, I want to say keynotes. That isn't right at all. It had lots of things. And I'm doing it where I'm doubting it. I'm like, oh god, Simon, you've got fun too many tangents. You need to stop filming and just start all over again. But I'm not going to. I'm going to battle on with this because we will break through all of this together. I don't know where it's come from, this ridiculousness. Anyway, so yeah, I would love to read more historical fiction about trans lives. I did actually think of one which the wonderful Rose Tremaine wrote called Sacred Country, and that is an absolutely beautiful, stunning book if you ever get the chance to read that one. So actually maybe I should include that in the books that I recommended. Anyway, but going back to the TBR, what are the 5 books? Well, I'm starting with, not as in this will be the first one I read, but out of the 5, and I don't know why I've done them in this order because I've got hardbacks mixed in with paperbacks, and normally I like to do them in size order, but apparently I'm throwing caution to the wind along with leaving all of my self-doubt and everything in too. So Variations by Juliet, Jaques, and this sounds amazing because it's a collection of short stories. And I'm going to read the blurb, which I don't normally do because I know people don't like it, and also I don't, but this was what really sold this to me. It says Variations is the debut short story collection from one of Britain's most compelling voices, Juliet Jaques. Using fiction inspired by found material and real life events, Jaques explores the history of transgender Britain with lyrical acerbic wit. Variations travels from Oscar Wilde's London to austerity-era Belfast via Interwar Cardiff, a drag bar in Liverpool just after the decriminalisation of homosexuality, Manchester's protests against Clause 28, and Brighton in the 2000s. Through diary entries of an illicit love affair, an oral history of a contemporary political collective, a 1920s academic paper to a 1990s film script, a 1950s memoir to a series of 2014 blog posts, Jaques rewrites and reinvigorates a history so often relegated to stale police records and sensationalist news headlines. This sounds like exactly what I want to read, but like not just about the trans community, but about like all of the queer community and all of the different groups within the queer community. So yeah, very excited for this one. Maybe I should have said this was the book that inspired this video, but there we go. Then one that I've been meaning to read for ages, which is sort of based around a real incident, but clearly not, because there's a ghost in it and a lot of people would say ghosts don't exist. I think they do. I don't know. Anyway, it's Briefly a Delicious Life by Nell, which is a story told through, I believe, the narration of a 14-year-old ghost who's been a ghost, I think, for a couple of 100 years. And it's set in 1838 when Frederick Chopin and George Sand and her children go to this monastery in Mallorca, I think. And the ghost kind of falls in love with George. And it looks at how I think she's protected other people in the past. I've heard it's amazing. And yeah, I would really like to get to this one soon. And then I have another book that's based on fact, but I think much more so because there's no supernatural element. Not that I'm saying supernatural stuff isn't true. You know what I mean. But I have White Houses by Amy Bloom, and the reason that I'm really keen to read this is I have recently watched the First Lady series on Paramount Plus, where you have Viola Davis playing Michelle Obama, Michelle Pfeiffer playing Betty Ford, and you have Gillian Anderson playing Eleanor Roosevelt. And I think I loved the Michelle Obama parts, but also they end really horribly because of Trump. But I knew that history more, whereas I knew next to nothing about Betty Ford and found her utterly fascinating. But there's story about Eleanor Roosevelt, what an incredible woman in so many ways, and what it must have been like for her to sort of deny her true self, even though she did, with Hick, who many people believe was her lesbian lover. And yeah, this is told through the eyes of Hick and their relationship. Obviously it's fictional, it's by Amy Bloom, but one that I'm just now desperate to read. And actually, as a sub sort of topic, I guess, if you've got any recommendations of books based on any of the First Ladies apart from Rodham, particularly anything fictional, I would love to know those in the comments down below too. I know I'm asking for two things technically now, but just because while we're at it, I would like more on the First Ladies because I don't know very much about any of them. And then two other books. Firstly, I have Jay Carmichael's Marlo, which is set in the 1950s in conservative Australia and looks at a couple of men who fall in love during that time. This has pictures in and stuff, so I'm not sure whether it's based on fact or whether it's using history to create, or the plot is based around what was going on historically. I'll find out once I read it, but this I'm really, really, really intrigued for. And again, it's a white queer male perspective, but it's one that I don't know anything about in terms of particularly that country or what was going on in that country at the time, so that really intrigues me. And then last but certainly not least, and probably one of the ones that I'm actually the most excited for, we have My Government Means to Kill Me by Rashid Newson. And this, I think, is set around the AIDS epidemic, which is something that I have read a lot about, but I don't think I've ever read about it from the perspective of what it was like for queer black people at the time. And this has, I literally can't think what the word is for these when you've got the numbered bits at the bottom. Oh my goodness, it's really winding me up. And as soon as I finish recording this, I'll remember. I know lots of people have probably told me by this point already. You don't need to, I'm sure I'll have found out. But yeah, anyway, those. This I just think is going to be something really, really different. I'm expecting it to be heartbreaking, devastating, which sadly is a commonality with queer fiction, particularly historical, because queer people have had a fucking awful time. So there we go. But I would like to know more about my sort of... I'd like to know more about people in my community from the past who I've just not heard enough about, and I don't feel we know enough about or have heard about the experiences enough about. I've said enough about a lot, so enough about me saying enough about. But there we go. Sorry this was really higgledy-piggledy and all over the place, but we have the 5 books that I would like to head to. Then we've got sort of a mishmash of books that I would recommend, and then we've got a book that I want to read that I sort of think fits the brief and sort of doesn't think fits the brief, but we'll be reading very soon. And 2 books that I read and loved this year that made me think about this, and 1 book that I really like and really, really don't. So there we are. That's this video. Done. I've got no more words. I'll be back on Thursday with a book haul from the books that I bought myself and some of the books that I sent from publishers in February. Then, like I said, my Italian, it's brimming. I was going to say it's a reading vlog, but it is brimming with so much food. For those of you who like my vlogs because of that, you'll really enjoy that. And then my mum and my reaction to the Women's Prize long list will be with you next Tuesday after it's announced at 6 p.m. And the Thursday after that, it will be my wrap up. I'm enjoying wrap ups much more this year. Didn't enjoy doing that one so much, but I want to bring in back stuff that I've done before, especially when it was just odd that so many people suddenly were commenting on this particular video about my favourite historical books. I will be reading other historical novels, not just ones with LGBTQIA plus themes. However, I just felt a bit saddened with myself that I hadn't done anything on that subject when it was LGBTQIA plus History Month. I just think that was a bit bad of me. So that's on me. I'm going to change my ways. But also, at the same time, I don't think we should only be reading those books during those months that celebrate those things. We should be doing them all throughout the year, hence why I've made a mini TBR. And with your recommendations, as they flood in, I can make a much longer one that I can dip in and out of throughout the rest of 2023. I'm going to stop waffling and go and possibly regret filming this, but I'm not going to edit it. I'm just going to put it up and I'll see what you all think of it. Oh dear. Anyway, I'm doing super duper well and I will speak to you all very, very soon. Bye.